I understand fully that Canadians want to know the truth and want transparency.
Tonight was the former Justice Minister pressured by the Prime Minister's office. Jody Wilson-Raybould speaks in the House of Commons.
That they've lost hope in the current conversation around reconciliation.
Youth advisors appointed by the Liberal government wait for action from the Indigenous Crown Relations Minister.
It's a cultural genocide. I mean, the fact that kids were not able to speak their language.
And the Canadian Heritage Minister speaks to the Indigenous Languages Act as it's debated in the House of Commons.
Good evening, welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward.
And I'm Melissa Ridgen. Today, Jody Wilson-Raybould spoke inside the House of Commons for the first time since the SNC-Lavalin scandal broke. She abstained from voting on an amendment to a motion brought by NDP MP Charlie Angus.
He wants an independent inquiry into whether there was political pressure brought on Wilson-Raybould to intervene in SNC-Lavalin's criminal case. Here is her answer.
The reason for my abstention is that the matter in part has to do with me personally, and I do not think that it is appropriate for me to vote on a matter that has to do with me personally. I have said that I am seeking counsel on this matter of what I can and cannot say. I understand fully that Canadians want to know the truth and want transparency. Privilege and confidentiality are not mine to waive, and I hope that I have the opportunity to speak my truth.
While the United We Roll protesters take Alberta's message to Ottawa, there are signs of a growing separatist sentiment back in that province. A group called Alberta Fights Back has set up 2 digital billboards, one in Edmonton and one in Calgary. Each sign asks the question, should Alberta ditch Canada? The group's director calls separation a very legitimate option so long as the Trudeau government continues to, they say, destroy Alberta's economy and way of life. There has been no response yet from the Indigenous title holders in the Alberta area to this idea.
The Bear Clan Patrol in Winnipeg is working with a new group in Thunder Bay after cutting ties with the patrol in the Northern Ontario city on the weekend. The Thunder Bay chapter has already deleted their social media accounts after ties were officially severed. Bear Clan Winnipeg's executive director says this is the first time they've had to step in on another group. There are roughly 50 similar patrols in the country. James Favel says one person was making a mess of things in Thunder Bay, and repeated attempts to have them change their tactics had failed.
They've been using our platform to incite hatred, cause division, and go after like the police, security guards at the Shoppers Drug Mart and things like that, and targeting people, calling them racist and things like that. There's a time and place for that, and you know that's not what our platform is to be used for. We're about bringing positivity, connecting people, unity, not divisive behaviors, and that's what we were seeing from them.
Lawyers for the families of 6 of the 7 youth who were subject of the First Nations Youth Inquest in Thunder Bay issued a report card today on the progress made on the jury's 145 recommendations. This is the second report card released by Aboriginal Legal Services. An overall grade of B+ was given, up from the C+ grade from a year ago. 71 of the 45 recommendations have been completed. This time around, the Thunder Bay Police Service was not given a grade. That's in part due to a recent police watchdog report that found the investigations into the deaths of 4 of the 7 youth were inadequate. The police service says it's making changes based on that watchdog report.
Indigenous youth advisors who were appointed by Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Carolyn Bennett are speaking out. They feel a report they compiled and handed over to the government in June 2018 is collecting dust rather than being acted upon. And they say youth are increasingly skeptical of the government's reconciliation talk.
What we feared initially is actually what's coming to happen, is that the report is not being implemented. It's most likely sitting on a shelf somewhere.
Andre Baer was one of 3 Indigenous youth advisors appointed by the Liberal government in 2017 to head up Indigenous Youth Voices. Their goal was to help implement the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action number 66. Number 66 calls on the federal government to establish multi-year funding for community-based youth organizations to deliver programs on reconciliation and establish a national network to share information and best practices. Indigenous Youth Voices handed in their roadmap in June 2018, and they say nothing's happened since.
It's really, really unfortunate, not only for us as advisors, but for youth across the country.
To compile the roadmap, the advisors met with youth groups, hosted a national gathering, and conducted a nationwide survey.
We heard young people tell us that in some cases they didn't believe in reconciliation, that they've lost hope in the current conversation around reconciliation.
We asked youth at a gathering in Thunder Bay whether they believed the government of Canada was serious about reconciliation.
I don't really get the feeling that that commitment's there. Like maybe the whole idea of reconciliation, maybe it sounded easier than it actually is.
Lyndon Wabus feels Canada is not living up to its word.
It's frustrating because they made so many promises and they're not even keeping those promises.
That is a sentiment echoed in the roadmap. Advisors hope the government hears what the youth had to say and don't take it personally or get offended by it.
There's historical truths in the roadmap. Young people had to share their truths and the negative impacts that the Canadian government has had on their lives, past and present. And sometimes it's hard to hear the truth.
The youth advisors say they will continue to push for their roadmap to be implemented.
It's time for action. It's totally time for action. We cannot rely on words and false promises any longer.
A statement from the minister's office says Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada is currently reviewing the advisors' work to inform next steps for the way forward.
We need to take a quick break, but there's still more news to come.
But first, here's a look at Thursday's weather forecast. Starting on the east coast, -4 for Halifax, 7 below in Charlottetown. Sunny skies and -18 for Nain, -15 for Happy Valley, Goose Bay, -6 with snow in Saguenay, snow and -2 for Quebec City. +1 with some snow for Toronto and Sarnia, 0 in Ottawa, -2 and snow for Thunder Bay, snow and 6 below in Sioux Lookout, -18 under sunny skies for Puckatawagan, 23 below in Churchill, snow with -11 for Winnipeg, -12 and snow in Brandon, -15 for Regina and Saskatoon, 13 below for North Battleford, -13 in Buffalo Narrows and Meadow Lake.
Welcome back. On today's edition of In Focus, we talked about food sovereignty and nutrition. Most First Nation, Inuit and Métis have limited access to traditional foods, and many more have limited food budgets. With hunting and harvesting rights under attack, how can Indigenous people keep a connection to culture through their traditional food, or even just eat healthy?
There have been, at least that I know of, 5 other cases of Métis people being charged in Northeast Alberta. In each instance, the Crown dropped the charges before it did go to trial, and this is another one where Métis people, I feel, are being harassed for trying to exercise their rights, and so we do have to mount a defense whenever this happens and try to defend the rights of our people.
Especially talking about food sovereignty, I think there's a lot more programming around food sovereignty and kind of that push towards it, which I think is really important. And of course, traditional foods are very important, not only culturally, but nutritionally as well, right? They generally include lean traditional meats that are high in iron and other vitamin and minerals. They also include fibrous fruits and vegetables and good fatty fish. So we want to include traditional foods as much as we can. That being said, it is going to, we're not going to be able to go 100% back to traditional foods. We have to kind of consider that store-bought foods are going to be a part of our lives. But I think if people can include it in their diets, then I think that's a good thing.
Legislation for the highly anticipated Indigenous Languages Act has been introduced in the House of Commons. While First Nations and Métis leaders applauded the bill, Inuit groups were less impressed. And there are some who feel the act is merely a symbolic gesture. For more, we sat down with the Heritage Minister, Pablo Rodriguez. Minister, thanks for joining us here. Can you tell us a bit about how this legislation will protect Indigenous languages?
Well, first of all, it's I would say more than a legislation. It's something absolutely fundamental to protect and to revitalize Indigenous languages. And has been worked with all national groups for 2 years, right? It's co-developed with the Inuit, with the Métis, with the First Nations. So the way it's going to happen is we're going to provide stable and long-term funding, and we're going to develop the programs with the Indigenous people because they know what they want. I'm not the one that's going to tell them what they should do because their needs are different based on regions, on languages, this and that. But the objective at the end is to revitalize, to protect Indigenous languages. They are being lost very quickly.
So what type of funding and programs are we talking about?
Well, it's going to be stable and long term. So we're working on the numbers with the different groups, but we want to make sure that the money flows to the different communities based on their needs. This bill is fundamental because it answers 3 calls to action, 13, 14, and 15, based on Indigenous rights. It also advances UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration on Indigenous Rights. So, and most importantly, we sat down for almost 2 years with the different group, sometimes on a daily basis, discussing with them, because it's about them. That bill is not for me. It's for Indigenous people and most importantly for their children and grandchildren.
You mentioned sitting down with the groups, but Inuit Tapiriq Kanatami said that they were in no way part of putting this bill together and have spoken out against it. How do you respond to that?
Well, they were with us since day one working on this. They would like the bill to go a bit further, and as I said, my door is still open. It's always open, and it will always be. So the bill is going to a committee. It's going to be debated, discussed at a committee. We keep meeting with them. But first, you need a bill. If you want to improve it, you need the bill. You need to table it. And so the bill has been tabled. Next week, it's starting at committee. I'm there for an hour. And as the bill advances in Parliament, we're still discussing with all groups to see how we can improve it, how can we add more things inside. But without a bill to start with, we can't do anything.
So there's still time to have changes and still get this legislation passed and through committees and Senate?
Yes, yes, because it's an absolute priority for us, and I hope we'll get the support of all the parties, but it's a priority for the Prime Minister, for myself, the government, and I would say all Indigenous people across the country. So many languages have been lost already, so now it's time we draw a line, we say it's enough, we start revitalizing, protecting the languages for future generations.
There are some who feel that this is a symbolic gesture and wonder why not give official language status.
Well, it's definitely not just symbolic because again, it's a clear answer to 3 of the calls to action, 13, 14, 15. It creates the office of a commissioner that will tell us if we're doing the right thing or not, give us recommendations. There will be, again, long-term stable funding. The solutions will be decided by the Indigenous people themselves. Some may decide they go right away to education, others through producing books, dictionaries. I mean, there's so many solutions, but it's up to the different groups to tell us what to do because they know better.
And so you haven't heard from the groups what type of funding there needs to be, stable funding?
Well, we're discussing with them, but we'll make sure that that the funding is there. And actually, it's a commitment. It's in the bill. It's very rare. I don't remember seeing a bill where the government commits in that bill long-term and stable funding. I've never seen that.
But no actual firm number, I guess. So
it will come soon.
You're someone who speaks a number of languages yourself. What does it say to you that many of these languages, all these languages, were once outlawed by this country?
It's awful. It's awful, and it's. I don't even. There's no name to describe what has been done by a succession of government to the Indigenous people. It's a cultural genocide. I mean, the fact that kids were not able to speak their language, that they were either ashamed or forbidden or punished because they would do so and the languages would be lost. I came here when I was 8. I didn't only spoke Spanish. I learned French and English after that. But I cannot imagine if somebody would have told me, okay, from now on you just speak English and French and you forget Spanish. No, because Spanish is who I am also, right? And it's the same thing for the different languages, for the different Indigenous group. We have to do something now.
Well, Minister, it's an important bill, and we look forward to seeing how it progresses, and appreciate you taking some time here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
After the break, we're going to continue our Perspective series on the child welfare system.
We'll hear from 2 former kids in care who are turning their lives around. But first, look at the rest of Thursday's weather forecast. Picking back up in northern Alberta, sunny skies and -10 for high level, -9 in Fort McMurray, 11 below for Medicine Hat and Red Deer, -10 in Calgary, +5 under sunny skies for Vancouver, 8 above for Tofino, -8 in Fort Nelson, 5 below for Dease Lake. In the Yukon, -21 in Old Crow, -6 with snow for Whitehorse, -9 in Fort Liard and Trout Lake, 17 below in Norman Wells. -21 with snow for Sax Harbor, -20 for Colville Lake and Paulatuck, -28 in Baker Lake and Chesterfield, -24 for Repulse Bay, -25 in Resolute and Arctic Bay. Welcome back. There is no question that Indigenous children in foster care are largely overrepresented across Canada. And once they are aged out, many face difficulties that can affect them for the rest of their lives. But some do go on to be happy and successful. APTN's Tina House takes a look at two former kids in care who are turning their lives around and changing the lives of others still in the system.
There's our mom with Christine.
Oh my God.
Today, Chris Tate and his older sister Marilyn are looking through old family photo albums.
Yeah, some of these I don't remember at all, so it's really cool. Like I feel like that one I feel like I kind of remember. This one I don't. So that's cool.
Chris and his sister, along with their 5 other siblings, were all put into care at an early age. For a while, Chris was in the same home with a few of his brothers, but it didn't work out, so he was moved around. He says that from the age of 3 years old until he aged out, he was in around 20 different homes in Seashelt, BC. He also says he endured a lot, and his memory of his childhood isn't great. But these photos are like filling in a childhood he never knew.
It's like eerie seeing yourself when you're super small, so. But it's cool, because paints a better picture.
Chris says his connection to family has helped him, and he reconnected with his sister when he was 17. And today, they decided to share Family Day together along with a few friends. He's now 27, and Tate has overcome a lot of obstacles since he aged out. In 2009, he received a national award for youth achievement and excellence from the Representative for Youth and Children. In 2012, he received the RBC Youth Achievement Award, and he was nominated by the Ministry of Child and Family Development. These days, he works in Vancouver as a researcher with Discourse Media, which specializes in data journalism.
I think it all starts with looking at what we have and building upon that. Somebody told me that very early on. That's how you create change in your own life, and that's how you can create systems change.
His job is to look at audits that the Ministry of Children and Family Development does on itself and see if the system is improving and if recommendations were followed.
No, I never really thought I'd get to the level of reading audits. I just thought it would end with talking about my own story or doing that, So I that's where I thought it was going to end. So the fact that I got an opportunity to work with Discourse and give back and also be employed, all the good things, was exciting. So.
Another shining star quickly making a name for herself is Cheyenne Andy. When she was just a few months old, she, along with her 2 other siblings, were placed into foster care with a non-Indigenous family. Their birth mother was unable to care for the kids because she struggled with her own mental health issues. But her foster parents ensured that all the kids remained in contact with her until her passing. Cheyenne says they all remained with the same foster family their entire lives and had a loving and supportive upbringing.
There was a lot of structure within it, and I really formed a really strong relationship with the foster parents. I called them mom and dad, and I'm still really close with all the relatives within their families.
However, despite being in a stable home, she says she still had her own challenges about her identity.
I feel like it was really hard to stay in touch with family back from where I am, but I ended up learning a lot more once I was older and once I was comfortable. My foster parents and my previous social worker gave me the opportunity to learn more when I was ready.
After graduating from high school, her social worker urged her to become an advocate for others.
At a young age, I had a really strong voice, and I was advocating for things within my own life that were just very personal.
And now, at the age of 27 years old, she now works with the Representative for Children and Youth as a youth engagement coordinator.
And I think that we can change it to over here. I think that would be really important.
She now travels across BC, teaching other Indigenous kids about their rights while in care.
I have gone and taught rights about the UN Convention on Rights of Child, the rights of kids in care, and the rights as Indigenous peoples. And I think that that's really important work.
For Chris Tate, his older sister Marilyn says she couldn't be more proud of what her brother has accomplished.
I'm very proud of my brother. He's come a long way. He's doing great. I love hearing of all the different things that he's getting involved in, and especially around the Indigenous stuff and the kids in care. And
I'm very passionate about this job. I tell people when I first got the job that this is my dream job. I'm very happy with where I am, and I wouldn't be here without my foster parents or my previous social worker. So,
Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Well, that's your APTN National News for this Thursday for Wednesday. Oh man, I thought it was Thursday already.
It feels like it. Well,
for more, visit our website, aptnnews.ca.
That's where you'll find today's episode of In Focus, where we discussed Indigenous food sovereignty. You can also catch the replay tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Eastern. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Have a great night.
And I'm Dennis Ward. We'll see you back here for Thursday.
Actual Thursday.
Actual Thursday.